The content of the show, Heading in the Right Direction, including discussions, graphics, and any other material you'll see or hear on Heading in the Right Direction, are for informational and educational purposes only. Heading in the Right Direction is not intended to be a substitute for professional help. Dr. Cohen is providing his general opinion on heading in the right direction based on his experience. Dr. Cohen is not your doctor and is not giving you professional advice. Dr. Cohen gives professional advice in private sessions to his patients. If you have a doctor, your doctor should be consulted with any questions you may have about the information you saw on Heading in the Right Direction. If you do not have a doctor, you should seek the services of a doctor and not rely on Heading in the Right Direction. Also, some of the information presented on Heading in the Right Direction is subject to legal protection and may not be used without the permission of Dr. Cohen.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Sidney Cohen. I'm the host of the show Heading in the Right Direction. And before we start today, I just want to sort of mention that I have to remind myself when I appear on this show that I need to bring a tie clip or a tie pin. So I say, if anyone has any really nice tie clips or tie pins they'd like to send into the show, I would very much appreciate it. Only kidding. So, what I want to do today is really two parts to the show today. Last time, for any of you who've seen it, I spent the session on the subject of bullying, the complicated subject of bullying. And I had a guest on who spoke about her personal experience and how much of the emotional pain of being bullied and abused when she was growing up continues to stay with her, continues to be something also still going on in her life at present. So we covered that and pretty extensively some other issues related to bullying. And since the show, there have been some emails that have come in and have said in so many words, but a few pretty consistently, that they found the show interesting, they found the interview to be thought-provoking and something that was kind of penetrating for people, but there wasn't enough time to get to the subject of, okay, so what do we do about it? What to do about bullying? And that's what I want to spend the first half of the show on today, what to do about it. And first thing I'm going to say before I get into any specifics about what to do about it is it's a lot easier said than done. A whole lot easier said than done to deal with bullying. I mean, there are books out there are talk shows out there are therapists and counselors, spiritual advisors who will tell you, here's what you need to do or should do about bullying. That's where I want to go with this, that it is much easier said than done to be able to stand up for yourself to bullying. With that said, though, I do want to make some recommendations, and I want to do this sort of in as organized and categorical way as I can do it. And first thing I want to touch on is a distinction I want to work with between what I'm going to call the internal dealing with bullying and then get to the external dealing, which is then the more interpersonal process of dealing with bullies themselves. So let me start with internal. What I mean by the internal piece of dealing with bullying is the key 4 words that I cannot recommend enough that you, to the best of your ability, if you've been bullied or still being bullied, that you make your passwords on an internal level. And those words are, I don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. Because if you don't, in your heart and soul, believe those 4 words, then, sort of by implication, the words you unfortunately may be believing deep down through the term I've used in previous shows and my books and so forth is the term inner bully. Your inner bully can be saying, guess what? You do deserve to be bullied. And although that kind of message is so self-sabotaging, so sabotaging of self-worth, if that is, if not consciously, but more deep down in your subconscious, the message is you do deserve to be bullied, well, then guess what? Your chances of coming up with the internal strength and then the external courage to stand up to a bully is much less likely to happen. That's very unfortunate. So, first piece, again, internally, is to become as convinced as you can make yourself convinced you don't deserve it. So, those are the key passwords. there's something else, and it goes with those words. And that's the word courage. My work, there's an operational definition I use of courage. Everyone knows the word, and there's, of course, dictionary definitions of the word courage. I want to present a word, though, a definition rather, that to me is a definition of courage that puts it in a more general context. And most people, I think it's safe to say, think of courage as some kind of major physical challenge, bungee jumping or horseback riding without a saddle. I mean, those are obvious examples of courage, but they're mainly, again, physical challenges, physical safeties at stake. The definition I want to use of courage is more situational, day-to-day, but because it's day-to-day, it has a lot more application. And that definition is anything you're reluctant or hesitant to do, but you make yourself do it anyway because it's in your best interest to do that. Anything you're reluctant or hesitant to do, but you make yourself do it anyway because it's in your best interest. Well, if we make that the definition of courage, I think it's safe to say, and I assume you'll agree, it is in your best interest, no matter how hesitant you may be, to muster up the courage because it's in your best interest. So courage is a necessity. Going with the internal words of, I don't deserve that, to muster up the courage is something that is a lot easier said than done. But in order to build up some of the courage, which is the next step I'll go with this, there are certain things you can do, or at least try to do inside, to get more courage going, like positive self-talk, building up that you're really worth something, truly worth something as a person. Positive self-talk is certainly something you can do. I also recommend building up some general self-confidence if you can, some self-esteem through physical means. Get yourself in the best physical shape you can. It's obviously a healthy thing to do no matter what. But in terms of the piece of standing up to a bully or bullying, it's never going to be a bad idea, for example, to do more exercise, do some weightlifting. Heck, I think one of the best ways to learn to stand up to bullies and bullying in whatever the context is through taking a martial arts class. I think martial arts classes are wonderful. If I had my way, actually, I think they should be taught in every school, but I don't want to get up my soapbox and just stay with that. But the fact is, and there's enough evidence, that taking martial arts or doing, again, some regular kind of exercise, weightlifting, kickboxing, whatever, is real good for self-confidence and real good for courage. So those are some of the internal pieces of what really is an important step in learning how to stand up to inner bullies. So, that said, let's go to the next step. Now to taking action, moving from the internal piece of things to reinforce within yourself to now taking that and doing something with it to challenge bullying. Whether it's in school, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in your personal life. I will get to a little bit of elaboration on that in a moment. So we're going to talk about taking action. I actually am going to begin with, I'm going to call it, taking inaction. Now, what do I mean by that? What I basically mean by taking inaction goes to the words that most of us grow up hearing. Be it our parents, be it teachers. What it's basically called, just ignore it. Just ignore them. I've always been struck by those words as classic words of easier said than done. But let me go with the words, since again, most of us are exposed to those words, encouraged to make those the strategy of choice for dealing with bullying. Well, if you're going to go the ignoring route and try your best to tolerate, not just maybe an incident of bullying, but an ongoing pattern of bullying, to try to make that happen, a couple of things. For example, one of the things you want to do if you're going to really try your best to ignore, at least tolerate bullying that's going on, and again, a pattern of it, is to use those internal tools. To remind yourself, yes, you don't deserve it. To remind yourself there is room for self-talk, there is room for meditation. And I meant to mention that there is a spiritual part that you can use internally. Especially if you're someone, for example, not necessarily required, but for some people to go within and turn to God. may be a piece that can help you build the courage that you may then want to need or use in part if you're trying to, quote, ignore the bullying. Well, let me mention a couple other possibilities. But before we do that, let's take a break, and I'll be back shortly.
In a world where bankers have lost all interest, where robots and fat cats rule our fortunes, one woman
Hi.
will stand up and strive to do the impossible. Be treated like a person. Friends and neighbors will join her quest. Ordinary people will band together against the forces of corporate greed. And together they will form Philadelphia Federal Credit Union, already in a neighborhood near you.
Imagine the finest hand-selected USDA prime steak you'll ever have. The freshest line-caught seafood, our Wine Spectator award-winning wine list, and soul-satisfying desserts. Bring that together with the perfect date, the winning business deal, a memorable family celebration. Welcome to Rod's Steak and Seafood Grill in nearby Morristown, New Jersey. Bring your appetite and feed your passion.
Your credit score is yours, and at Experian Credit Expert, we want to help you really use it. With access to helpful Experian experts over the phone and online, we can help you use it to get a better idea of what info the banks have on you. Use it to get more choice of mortgages. Use it to make your money go further. Take the next step to improving your financial future with your free 30-day trial at experian.co.uk.
Here at Freppy's Tex-Mex, you can definitely taste the freshness in our food. You should definitely come to Freppy's because it's a great place. You can bring your family, very kid-friendly. All my servers are amazing, friendly people. Everyone here is just happy to serve, and I think it shows. The thing that sets us apart is the quality and freshness of our food. And I think once you try it, you'd be coming back. I'm Joe DeSario, co-owner of Freppy's Tex-Mex in Plainfield, New Jersey.
Hey, my name is Jimmy Love, and I'm here to tell you about an exciting new television show called Buy, Sell, or Give It Away. Tired of waiting for those high-priced newspaper ads to print? You call them up and you have to wait 2 or 3 days for the ad to show up? Well, no more waiting. Every day, right here at noon from 12 to 1, Buy, Sell, or Give It Away is going to be accessible for you to call in. Maybe you got a boat for sale. I'm selling my pet dinosaur. Maybe you want to sell your house. Give away some furniture to a family in need. Just give us a call. We'll tell everybody what you have for sale or what you're looking for, and your response will be immediate, and it's free. Hey, listen, summertime is coming. Maybe you want to buy a travel trailer or maybe rent a travel trailer. Just give us a call. Buy, Sell, and Give Away. Fantastic show. Don't miss it. Tune in every day from 12 to 1 right here at RadioVisionNetwork.com. Buy, Sell, or Give It Away.
Today's show has been sponsored by More Than Gifts. Come see our new location in Marlton, New Jersey. Not just gifts, but more.
Welcome back. I'm Dr. Sidney Cohen, and this is Heading in the Right Direction. I'll follow up a little bit more on the subject of coping with and dealing with bullies. And we'll switch on the last part of the show, some stuff on addiction. But staying with the subject for the moment of describing it as the inaction piece of dealing with bullies. I was mentioning about holding on to certain internal messages. Let me move from there to a couple other ways to gear yourself in still a kind of inactive, passive way, but not staying passive about it. So there's 2 things in particular I want to add here. One thing is, I think you want to remind yourself to not stoop to the bully's level. As much as there may be an impulse to want to really get aggressive verbally or physically, and that getting to some degree, certainly at least verbally, if not physically aggressive in certain controlled ways, is not stooping to the bully's level, because you're coming from a position of confidence. You're coming from a position of standing up for yourself or for someone else. But one more thing I do want to suggest. Keep in mind, not just, you want to not stoop to their level, you want to make sure to use these internal self-talk reminders. But one more thing I highly recommend you keep in mind, even if you do go ahead and take a more active approach to stand up to a bully. Remind yourself, it is virtually guaranteed. Whether you've ever really thought about it or not, whether you've ever really looked at it or not, I can guarantee you that any real bully is a very unhappy person. And if you keep that in mind, I don't say that to create a compassion. If you want to feel a little compassion for a bully, compassion is always a good thing, certainly, but need I say, in the face of being bullied, it's pretty tough to feel compassion at that time for a bully. Yet, to give yourself some self-control, to give yourself, again, some sense of what you're worth and what the bully is really not worth, virtually guaranteed they're an unhappy person who's bitter and is really not doing the things with their own lives to take some control, to build up their own self-esteem, and heck, to stop bullying people. Just remember that, because I do think it can help you keep some perspective. Okay, that said, I want to talk now about the more active or action-oriented approaches to standing up to bullies. And I want to say that there are, in my mind, 3 criteria that you might want to use to determine when you want to make yourself, push yourself, or just know it's time from going to trying to ignore and tolerate a more inactive approach to taking an active approach. 3 criteria I recommend. Number 1, if you've reached a point, especially if it's a pattern of bullying, whether it's one particular bullying, a group, be it in the workplace, be it school, wherever it is, you reach a point where you're really starting to feel, if not fully traumatized, pretty close to it. That's one time, one criteria where it's going to be awfully difficult for any human being to say, I can't ignore it anymore. I have to realize I can't. So that's one criteria. Second one is, if you reach a point where you become concerned that there's a rage building up inside of you, that if you keep squelching, it could eat you alive, or it could lead to you exploding in a rage, which you really don't want to do. Tempting at times as it may be or feel to do that. So if there's, again, a sense of rage building, and the third criteria is called justice. If you reach a point where you feel it's time to get some justice here, because all you're being exposed to is being the victim of a huge injustice. And something may click inside at some point and say, that's it, that's enough here. It's enough of an injustice. I am being very badly affected by this. And if we're talking a child, they may not necessarily realize it themselves. That's certainly the parent's responsibility to notice and to monitor. Is there a point? The kid's been talking about being bullied. Does it appear to the parent, and being honest with themselves, this kid is starting to get traumatized? At which point, it's time to move to the more active approach. Now, we're going to talk about taking a more active approach. Then there are a couple of strategies that I think need to be considered. Let me start with, it's an active approach, but it isn't I'll call it as directly confrontational approach, which is the next piece I'll get to. And it's called mediation. So let's start in the workplace. You are experiencing what you feel clear is an ongoing pattern of bullying by a coworker. Trickier part is if you feel it's somebody in a supervisory or a management role. That's unquestionably where it gets trickier. So let's suppose you have chosen, maybe not to outright ignore it, to do the best you can to tolerate, to use these internal strategies of reminding yourself, keep perspective, but you reach a point you can't just keep taking it. But rather than taking some risk, which it could be, to take a confrontational approach, if there's an option, and there isn't always an option in every workplace, but there could be an option that it really could be time to talk to the boss, or for companies that have them, a human resources department. Now, we all recognize, I think, that to do that, maybe you're feeling at a point you just can't not do it. But there's also, of course, potential risks, potential repercussions. So that's why it is tricky. It is tricky. So it is really an individual decision. Are you at a point you feel where you're getting or been at least somewhat semi-traumatized? Are you at a point where the sense of injustice just feels like you really in your own mind have no choice? You want to get some action involved here. So you could turn to see if there's room for mediation in the workplace. If it's in school, one of the things I think is terrific is that there has been increasingly in the last X number of years situations in more and more schools, is my understanding, of what's called peer mediation, where certain students volunteer and then are trained to be mediators between bullies and individuals who perceive themselves as being the victim of bullies. Of course, though, if it's a significant degree of bullying and peer mediation isn't either preferred or really isn't going to get anywhere, then the ultimate mediator must be parents getting in touch with vice principal, principal, etc. Go to the top, because it really may take that degree of mediation. So that's a second possibility. And why don't we at that moment, on that note, take a little break, and I will come back a little bit more on this, and then we'll switch to addiction.
Here, we have an attractive orange and a distinguished apple. The two similar, but opposites. Theory, a wingman is needed. Or perhaps, a wing lemon. A friend to the orange and an acquaintance to the apple, the lemon brings the two opposites together. See, with a little fresh thinking, the universe can be surprisingly smooth.
When we make Beyond Natural dry dog and cat foods, we start with real meat as the first ingredient. We leave out corn, wheat, and soy. And we own where our dry food is made. 100%. Can other brands say all that? For nutrition you can trust and your pet will enjoy. Does your food go beyond? Learn more at purinabeyond.com.
Fitzpatrick's. Deli dine for breakfast and lunch. And at night, gourmet dine for dinner with entrees and specialty sandwiches including certified black Angus cuts of beef and wild-caught seafood, plus catering options for specialty events. Since 1989, Fitzpatrick's, your hometown place with upscale tastes.
Apple Ridge is about freedom. Apple Ridge is about community. Apple Ridge is about home. Apple Ridge, everything you want, more than you expect. Welcome to your new neighborhood. Apple Ridge Senior Living. Enjoy a maintenance-free, affordable luxury lifestyle today. Visit appleridgeseniorliving.com and find out more about the Apple Ridge experience.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Milan, host of Read All About It. I interview authors of all kinds about their journeys of writing and the struggles that they face. You can watch my show at 12 p.m. on Wednesdays. Tune in to Radio Vision Networks. We hope to see you then.
Today's show has been sponsored by Farmers Insurance in Voorhees, New Jersey. To protect your assets and the people you love, call Mike Skoranek, your local Farmers Insurance agent, at 856-336-2553.
We are farmers. Bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.
Welcome back. Dr. Sidney Cohen, and this is Heading in the Right Direction. In thinking about things while we're taking a commercial break, my original intention, as I mentioned at the top of the show, was to begin today to talk some about addiction and then get more extensively into that in my next show. The way things are working out is I'm kind of reviewing my thoughts and my notes. I'm going to stay to the end of the show on the subject of bullying and then devote the whole next show to the subject of addiction. So I'd like to go a couple more thoughts here to put out there. And in staying with the subject of mediation before getting to taking a truly more active approach and standing up for yourself to a bully, the other thing I want to be sure to mention is that in the end, whether you take action, starting, let's say, from mediation, it's an individual decision. It is up to you. No matter how much, whether it's parents, friends, other authority figures who are saying to you, you got to stop ignoring it now. You got to do something about it. It's up to you. It's up to you if you want to and when you do it. And if you don't reach past the if point, don't even think about when you're going to do it. The if point is the courage is there, the confidence is there, the sense of injustice is there. Then you want to start looking into what's the best approach. I also want to mention, though, there are instances in which bullying certainly may not just be an individual action or an individual experience. There are some instances, could be in school, could be in the workplace, where it isn't just you. And one of the things that can come up is you can feel like it's just me. He, she is only after me. Meanwhile, it's very possible that, be it in school, be it in the workplace, a particular bully isn't singling you out. There are other victims. And sure, that's not a lot of consolation for you because you're dealing with, you're being bullied. What I'm getting at is there may be in situations where there really are other people feeling that way to take collective action, whether it's 2 of you, 5 of you, whatever it is, together in the workplace. You speak to the boss, you go to human resources. In school, together, you at least maybe try peer mediation or you go through parents to vice principal or principal. It's an individual decision, but it can be a collective decision. And I want to be sure to mention that. Okay, last but not least for today, let's talk about moving from inaction, mediation, to directly standing up. And the distinction here I want to make is verbal versus physical. So let's start with verbally standing up for yourself. You're at a point where you reached a point, there was a movie many years ago, I'm just going to, show my age at this, was called Network, and there's an immortal scene in the movie Network where the main speaker has reached a point, in a state of rage, he screams out the window, I am mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. If you've never seen the movie, you have to see the movie. Anyway, in that kind of iconic scene, it's obvious he's reached a point where he can't hold back anymore. Although in his case it wasn't necessarily about bullying, a more general agitation. That is the point that anyone can reach. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And if you reach that point, the first option is verbal. As hard as it can be, as much courage as it can take to go right up to a bully, stand your ground literally, do the best you can to make eye contact and say, no more, no more. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve this onslaught. I don't deserve to be belittled and demeaned like this. And I'm not going to take it anymore. And if you keep it up, I'm going to report you. I'm going to report you. And I'm going to stand my ground on doing that. Okay. If you can reach that point and you can muster up that courage and have the confidence, feeling that you really have it within you and mean it within you, that's terrific. It's a wonderful thing for self-worth and for self-respect. However, you must keep in mind that there could be consequences. There could be consequences right there on the spot. We all know what bullies are capable of doing at the moments where they're stood up to. They certainly can, at minimum, get verbally aggressive back. Worst case scenario, they could get physical. So going into standing up to a bully verbally, you have to keep that in mind. And the odds are you are keeping it in mind, even though you may have reached a point where you're saying, I don't care what kind of repercussions there potentially could be. I'm standing my ground. Better later than never. So that's the verbal standing up. Let me make 1 or 2 comments, though, on actually taking a more physical approach. In the workplace, of course, need I say, you're not going to resort to physical standing up to a bully. So let's immediately move from there, tempting again as it may be. So let's talk about in school, or let's talk about in the neighborhood. If you reach a point where you feel either you've tried something in the category of mediation, or you've just not considered mediation, you feel like that's not for me, So let's suppose you've taken it up a notch. You have gotten verbally in the bully's face, verbally aggressive, and you see or you feel still not getting you where you want. Either the bully keeps it up, or you sense it's still not as much of an assertiveness or aggressive as you want. The thing about ultimately taking a physical approach is that as much as certainly it is to be discouraged, it is to be only the last resort, and really needs to be. However, if it's at a point, this is my opinion, take it for whatever it's worth. In my opinion, there may come a point in which self-protection does really take precedence. Or protection of someone who is right there with you, especially say if it's a loved one or a friend, and you feel, especially if there is physical aggression on the bully's part, if you choose to do that, do the best you can to keep it brief. Whether it would be just one act of something that is physically aggressive. If you need to, and you want to do it because you feel it's a last resort, understand though, there could be repercussions. Sure, there could be, again, the immediate repercussions of the bully's response. Let's call it like it is. There is the potential repercussion that if you go too far, you could be in big trouble. You could end up in legal trouble. I have to cover all the bases here because we all have to keep that in mind. At the same time, going back to mad as hell, I'm not going to take it anymore. There may be instances, again, especially self-protection, where you may have reached a point where you are saying, I got to do what I got to do. So, I think I'll leave it at that on the complicated subject of bullying. Since I didn't get today to begin the subject of addiction, that will be the focus of my show next time, which will be on July 8th. And I'm very much looking forward to the part of that show where I will have a very special guest. There is a treatment center for addiction in Westmont, New Jersey. It's called The Starting Point, if anyone hasn't heard of it. And the individual who is the director and founder of Starting Point, Mr. Vince DiPasquale, who I respect beyond words, will be my guest. And I'm honored that Vince will be my guest on that show. So I encourage you to tune in. I'll give a sort of a 10-minute start of some general things about addiction, and then Vince and I will talk together about the complicated subject of addiction. So thank you very much for tuning in today. Hope you found it worthwhile. Hope you got some food for thought, and I very much look forward to the next show and seeing everyone again. Take care.